whenever you're ready.
Thank you. All right, I call this meeting to order, and first on the agenda, we're going to do roll call. Commissioner Vice Chair Gail Jackson.
Gail did email me that she will be late, but she will be joining.
Thank you. Commissioner Jesse Breckenridge.
Present.
Commissioner Carol Curtis. Commissioner Carol Curtis. Commissioner Cal McCloy.
Barney, you will need to unmute.
Okay.
I'm present.
Cal's present.
Thank you. Commissioner David Steiner.
I'm here.
Thank you. Commissioner Thomas Waddell.
Here.
Thank you. Commissioner Carol Curtis. All right. City staff. Council member Deb Harris.
Here.
Economic Vitality Director Heidi Hansen. Economic Vitality Director Heidi Hansen. Airport Director Barney Helmick.
Present.
Airport Programs Manager Brian Gall.
Present.
Airport Communications Manager Claire Harper.
Claire is out of country right now.
All right, thank you. ARFF Ops Manager Tim Skinner.
Present.
And Recording Secretary Missiela Sanner.
Present.
Thank you. Moving on, preliminary general business, public comment, participation, input. Items presented during the public participation input portion of the agenda cannot be acted upon by the commission. Individual members of the commission may ask questions of the public, but are prohibited by open meeting laws from discussion or considering the item among themselves until the item has been officially placed on the agenda. Is there any public comment, participation, or input at this time? All right, hearing none, let's move on to announcements, reconsiderations, changes to the agenda, and other preliminary announcements. Cancellation of our monthly communication and business update for April.
Yeah, so since our communications manager, Claire, is unable to attend the meeting this month, her portion of the normally scheduled agenda is canceled for the time being. We'll resume next month.
All right, thank you. Approval of the minutes, regular meeting of March 9th, 2023. Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved. Tom Waddell.
Thank you. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Second.
Thank you. All those in favor, unmute and say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you. Item 4, City Council updates. Councilwoman Deb Harris.
So good afternoon. And as I said to another commission, I don't know if it was this one or another one, you know, if you have specific things that you want me to report back on, I'm more than happy to do that. But there's a lot that happens at City Council. So, you know, I don't want to take up all the time and tell you, you know, bit by bit, everything that happened. So at this point, I guess I don't have anything.
Is there anything that you can think of that would impact the Flagstaff Airport as far as travel? Are there any new initiatives that council is thinking about that or discussing that would bring an influx to Flagstaff, in or out? New business or?
Yeah. Not that anything off the top of my head that I remember from our last council meeting. I do take notes, and if I think there's something that the commission should know about, I definitely will bring that back to the next meeting. But right now, I think everything is just kind of going along, and there are no real initiatives that I'm aware of.
All right, council members, is there anything that you would like to ask Council Member Deb Harris at this time? Or is there anything that you would like for Council Member Deb Harris to report on for the next meeting? And maybe we can just kind of noodle on that, and as we do think of items, we can email and let you know. We can email Missy. But really anything, so Council Member Salas, she would bring back just really a synopsis of what was happening with City Council, high level, and just letting the Airport Commission know, what's being discussed, what kind of economic vitality opportunities there are that are being discussed, and not so much just for the Flagstaff Airport, but also to, just Flagstaff in general, because, new business always brings in travel and in and out of Flagstaff. Even events that are going to be happening that brings the community together, that has people traveling to Flagstaff within the state or outside the state, I think are relevant. I know that, we're going into the summer months, and so we have some wonderful attractions that are happening. So, those type of report outs are very much appreciated as well.
Okay, I sure will.
All right, thank you. Anything else, council members, that you would like to add before we move on? All right, thank you. And if you do think of anything, just please email Missy so we can hear from Council Member Harris next time. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on, staff reports. Barney Helmick.
Yes, because Claire's going to be out until next week, I'm going to cover this. We go to employments. For the month of March, we had 7,461 employments. Missy and I were discussing this morning, and it does not go back to 2018 on this chart, but we are tracking above the highest passenger employments that we had prior to the United entrance and departure. So we're looking at what could be a very good year for just a single carrier. I think some of that is the Dallas route has been very exceptionally received by the community. Next slide, please. Operations. We're still seeing a downward trend for operations at 2,387 for the month of March. It's pretty much self-explanatory, and that is because of the weather. The majority of our operations are either general aviation or military. The general aviation population has just not had weather that's very compatible for their operations. We have seen a good amount of corporate traffic. Even military traffic's been a little bit down. Any questions?
I don't see anybody from Orville's team on this meeting. So if you want to also continue on to fuel flow numbers after maybe Gail has her question.
Okay.
Hi, Barney. I was hoping you could expand a little bit on the corporate numbers that you just were talking about.
I don't actually have an exact number of those, but Orville and Brian and Tim and I meet every 2 weeks, and it was brought up that he's seeing a lot of celebrity traffic coming in and out the last 2 months. And when I look over there, I do see a lot of larger, what we call heavy metal jets. A lot of that because they do not put their flight tracking under their company name for protection is not something we can readily access. But we are seeing, I would say, a higher than normal for this time of year amount of the corporate size aircraft over at Orville's.
It would be fantastic, and I know I'm digging deep here, but if we could find out where they're going afterwards, because oftentimes we have businesses that come in and they fly in literally under the radar. So it would be good for us to know. I don't know if that's something that maybe Orville and his team could ask. What brings you to our region? I think that would be incredibly helpful to know.
We can talk to them about that. I can tell you of one company that's been in quite a bit in the last year is Chick-fil-A. Somebody in the higher up chain has ties here in Flagstaff, which I've not been able to find out. And they make a lot of visits here to see their operations in Flagstaff.
That's wonderful. Thanks for sharing.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I did a tour of the hospital with the owner of the Chick-fil-A up here. I don't remember his name. But yeah, he has quite a big team, for his Chick-fil-A restaurant. So it's interesting that you've seen more traffic. I'm wondering if there's going to be another location possibly. I don't know. Interesting.
It'd be nice.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think his name is Nathan.
Yes, there you go. Yep, that's him. All right. Thank you, Barney. Do you want to move on to the fixed?
Jesse, has Nathan been talking to you about building a new building?
Hasn't, but his daughter and my daughter are really good friends at Sechrist, so I've gotten to know him through that connection. But yeah, he's a good guy, good people.
Okay. As Missy said, Orville's unable to attend right now unless he pops in. For the month of March, he had 87,577 gallons. The majority of his drop is the loss of United Airlines. They had to purchase fuel for their flight from here to Denver because of the too high altitudes, and that's been a substantial drop. The numbers are still fairly decent for March. Of course, we're getting ready to go into the summer rush. I'm going to add to this fuel flow thing a bit of information that we've been tracking. There is a effort in the industry to switch from low lead fuel for the general aviation population down to a unleaded fuel. There is a congressional demand that it's in place by 2030. One of the leaders of this push in our side of the industry, a gentleman named Robert Olslager, who retired from Centennial recently, and mentioned that there are several different fuel varieties that are in testing process. One thing that is a problem is that the larger twin engine piston aircraft are unable to fly on these because the octane level is not high enough. But the real problem is that until we can get production in place and distribution in place, like we have with our current fuels, it's going to be cost prohibitive across the country. That's part of what he's pushing, is getting efforts in place to get refiners and shippers of this product. But it is a product that we're watching very closely, as is Orville. So, questions?
Let me add one point of clarification on that. So when we talk about avgas or 100 octane low lead fuel that Barney was mentioning that still has a lead content, that fuel is intended for use in what we call single engine piston aircraft. So your smaller general aviation aircraft. So our commercial jets, private jets, helicopters, even a large percentage of the high performance propeller aircraft that use turboprops, all use a different fuel called Jet A or jet fuel. So those don't contain any lead content. So at Flagstaff, it's a relatively small percentage of sales that are related to that leaded aviation fuel. But just in case there's any questions about how commonly that fuel is used, it is used frequently around the country, but is generally in those smaller general aviation aircraft.
Yeah, less than 10% of Orville's sales is in this market, but it is the majority of our base tenants. That's all I've got for the GA report. You're still muted, Christine.
Of course I am. All right. Thank you, Barney, and thank you, Brian, for that clarification. Very much appreciated. All right, let's move on to project and grant updates. Mr. Brian Gall.
Thank you, Chair Caldwell. So we have our running map of projects across the airport. You'll see on there that we completed a few phases of airfield maintenance. Those were last fall before the weather got in the way. So we haven't had any new check marks to add to the map. In recent days, we are getting closer on a number of these, including the paid parking system. So just a reminder that there are those three primary funding sources for projects around the airport. CARES grant, which is a shorter term grant that allows us to perform operations and maintenance around the airport. There's the airport fund, so that's funded by the city itself. And then there's other FAA grants. So those are our airport improvement program. There's a variety of different grants that go into that, but those are kind of our primary funding source. So we've changed the format of this presentation a bit to include the project updates based on those funding sources that go along with this map. Next slide, please. So for the CARES grant projects, this is that coronavirus relief grant that expires in a little over a year. So we've completed construction on the West Flex Hangar Shade Maintenance, Airfield Maintenance Phase 1 and 2, and the Parking Lot Rehabilitation Phase 1, which was the lot over at Wiseman Aviation. Work in progress, and really should be starting soon, is the Terminal Maintenance Phase 1. We have an Airfield Maintenance Phase 3 project that was going on in the fall that we had to put on temporary hold for weather that'll be kicking back up in the next several weeks. And we're just about wrapping up the design of the terminal fire sprinkler replacement, and we'll be applying for permits and going construction on that project very soon. For projects with design pending, we're going to be doing a repair to our runway pavement in a small area on the runway where we've seen some cracking. And we're going to be doing an additional planned project for ARF Station Maintenance Phase 1. It's not on the list yet because they're a little bit further out, but we are planning 2 additional phases of terminal maintenance to make some repairs and other maintenance activities within the airport terminal itself. Oh, it's not on any of these slides. We didn't have a spot for ADOT grants, but we do have an upcoming runway closure this summer for an ADOT fund project that is going to be performing a seal coat and restripe of our entire runway. So the asphalt pavement will be completely sealed and new pavement markings will be applied. That is scheduled for the middle of July. The airlines were notified more than 6 months in advance, so there weren't any tickets sold for that. During that, I think it's a 6-day closure window. The airport will be closed to fixed wing operation, so planes won't be able to operate, though helicopter traffic will still be able to fly in and out. Next slide, please. So for FAA funded projects, the biggest project we have at the moment is our snow removal equipment building. This building is planned to be adjacent to the ARF station. It includes 12 equipment storage bay for snow removal and other airport maintenance equipment, and 1 maintenance bay where we can perform heavy maintenance activities on our equipment, our pieces of heavy equipment. Design is ongoing just in the next week or so, we'll be submitting a request to the FAA for an alternative delivery method. So the FAA generally requires projects to be funded through what they call a traditional design, bid, build, project delivery method. Under that system, the airport would hire a designer who would complete a complete set of plans and drawings that would then go out to an open bid for contractors to bid on, and the airport would be required to select the lowest responsible bid, meaning the lowest bid that meets the minimum requirements for the project. So what we're asking to do is a project delivery method called construction manager at risk. Under that system, right about now, where the design is advanced to somewhere between 30 and 60% of completion, we would advertise for contractors to submit their qualifications to join this project on an evaluation system that is based on qualifications rather than based on their lowest price. And then once they're selected, they can provide feedback to that designer about maybe materials that are easier to source locally or design methods that can be done quicker, basically make the design more efficient. And then at that time, once the final plans are ready, that construction manager at risk, that prime contractor, would bid out all of the subcontractor work for competitive bids. So they would go get prices from the different subconsultants, subcontractors that would be working on the project to still provide a competitive price. And then they would provide a maximum price that the work would be performed for. And that's that risk part, is basically that construction manager at risk will say, we're going to build this project as long as we don't have any changes to the design for a maximum of this amount of dollars. And then they have to go out and source those subcontractors that can build it for that price. So we're going to request that. In this case, because of the complexities of the site and the challenges of working in the area, it was probably going to be a 2-season project, meaning we'll probably build some of it in the fall, have to do a winter shutdown, and then pick back up again. So those with holding prices over an extended period of time can be challenging. And it's really more beneficial to have that construction manager at risk rather than a hard bid contract that gives us less flexibility. One of the other items that we need to get finished to complete that project is a cultural study of the site. That's part of our FAA environmental clearance. We have that work scheduled to start next Monday. We were waiting for the snow to clear off the site. As of about a week and a half ago, there was 18 inches of snow on the ground, and as of yesterday, I believe it was all clear. So they're coming out on Monday. They'll perform that study of the site, and then once we get that clearance from the FAA, there'll be one more step in the process towards breaking ground on that project. Next slide, please. So paid parking infrastructure. We've been talking off and on about the parking lots, the economy lot construction that was going on last year, and the paid parking system that we're in the process of procuring. So paid parking infrastructure was the changes to the terminal lot and some slight modifications to the economy lot that we needed to make in order to install and operate that paid parking system. So as part of that, concrete paving on the new driveways, new entry and exit lanes into the terminal lot is in progress and should be complete next week. We've been placing conduit around the terminal above the roof line, and then eventually it drops when it gets past the terminal down underground to carry communications from the new paid parking system into the internet connections within the airport terminal. We're currently looking ahead of schedule on the parking infrastructure installation, and the pending items that we have are equipment pad construction, some asphalt patching, some conduit interduct installation. So we're installing these very large conduit lines to carry the electrical and communications network for that. But within that, we're going to have to install some smaller lines to separate the different systems. So there'll be some installation of those within the conduit. And then once those are in, we'll be able to install the fiber optic lines themselves that are going to be part of the communication system, and then the power that will supply the entry and exit gates and other equipment. On the next slide, I have a few pictures of that that show the state of the lot as of a couple days ago. We'll go to the next slide to see when you get a chance. So the one on the left shows what will be the terminal lot entry lanes. The forms you can see there are for the concrete curb and the island where some of the parking equipment will exist. Like I said, I think this picture was either yesterday or the day before, and now almost all that curb has been poured, and I believe that they will be starting to install the reinforcement that will be within the concrete for the major concrete pour next week. The one on the lower right is the terminal lot exit lanes. So this is more on the northwest side of the terminal lot, and that is the island that you can see poured in concrete there. So that island will eventually have like a half circle completed on each end, and then those lanes will be paved in concrete next week as well. Next slide, please. So that's an update on our current construction and other projects at the airport. If anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Brian, for the visuals. Those are always helpful to see everything in action. Commissioners, any questions for Brian? All right, thank you very much for the updates, Brian. And if you want to jump into just the discussion items, paid parking policy.
Sounds great. Thank you, Chair Caldwell. So this is related to that paid parking system we were just talking about. And some of the commissioners who have been on the Airport Commission for a while might remember this from maybe a year and a half ago. Was when we first brought this up. We're bringing it back around. You know, we had a little bit of a change of the way the system was going to be implemented, and now we're getting to the point where we're close enough to the installation that we're ready to start talking about how we will implement and enforce the rules and regulations and some necessary changes to the airport rules and regulations. So a little bit of background is that the airport rules and regulations that basically govern the operations here at the airport are adopted by City Council and included in our city code. So we discussed some draft revisions to these rules and regulations in 2021. We developed those original drafts by looking at parking related rules and regulations from other airports and borrowed some of them and adapted them to address our concerns and the way we think our new paid parking system is going to operate. So some of this is in the process of moving from a free parking system to a paid parking system. We're going to need to create some definitions and some space for the airport and Park Flagstaff to be able to enforce our parking rules and regulations. So our primary focus areas that we're going to make changes to these rules and regulations that will then be taken to council for approval. The primary focus is on defining a maximum parking duration before vehicles are considered abandoned. So the issue we've had to date is that with our lot be considered a long-term parking lot, there's no definition in the code right now that says at what point does a vehicle go from being parked long-term to being parked so long that it's now abandoned on the site. So by looking at other airports, they generally vary from about 30 to 90 days, depending on the airport, with most falling into a 60-day range. And so that is what staff is currently recommending we match for our maximum parking duration in our lots prior to vehicles being considered abandoned. And now that we're charging for parking spaces, we'd like to prohibit vehicles from parking in more than one space. You know, each space in our parking lot is a source of revenue for the airport. So if a vehicle parks in two spaces, essentially they're taking up a revenue source that we could be, potentially somebody else could be parked in that we could be gaining revenue from. So we'd like to make a prohibition for that, which would also include some language to either preclude or to have additional requirements for oversized vehicles. I don't think we want to totally disallow oversized vehicles from parking in our lots. Specifically, we do have some businesses that bring larger vehicles in sometimes. You'll occasionally see Forest Service vehicles, sometimes wildland firefighting vehicles that are a little bit bigger than one parking space. They need to park in here and have staff fly out. Also, our railroads have larger vehicles that sometimes carry trailers that perform railroad maintenance that will stop in the airport like Flagstaff when they're done for the week. So I think we'd like to find a way to accommodate those. Possibly by having paying for more than one space or a percentage in addition to a single space based on the size of the vehicle with some advance notice to airport staff so we could work out those rates and then give them a designated area to park within the lots. We also want to do a prohibition on parking by non-electric vehicles in our electric vehicle charging spaces. The original airport rules and regulations were written before electric vehicle charging spaces were common. So now that we're seeing those, we do occasionally get people who disobey those signs and will park in there, and there's nothing in the code that really backs that up at this point. So we'd like to include a prohibition for non-electric vehicles parking in those EV charging spaces. Next slide, please.
I see a hand up from Councilmember Harris.
Yes, I do have a couple questions. Can you go back to the previous slide? Okay, so what's the are we charging by the hour, by the day, by the week? What's the
Yeah, great question, council member. So the rates were sent out for public comment, I believe it was at the end of 2021, and they were approved by council in either late 2021 or early 2022. And so the rates that were approved for our parking lots were $7 a day for the terminal lot, which is the lot closest to the airport terminal, and $5 a day for the economy lot. There's also an hourly rate. I'd have to go back and double check. I believe it's $1 an hour until you reach that daily rate. And then there is a weekly rate that is basically one free day per week. So in conversations with our business community, if they had longer trips, I wanted to give them a little bit of a break. So people who park for 7 days, for example, will be charged for 6 in both of the lots. So they drop 1 day per week at those rates. And there is an automatic escalation included in those rates as approved. So it would go up by $1 a day per lot. So sometime in the future, it would go up to $6 a day for the economy lot and $8 a day for the terminal lot. We developed those rates by conducting a study looking at other similar airports around the state and in the Four Corners region, and did a comparison of whether they were uncovered garages, how far you had to walk to the buildings, generally how busy the airports those lots were. And we tried to set our rates to be on the very low end of that range that we commonly saw at other airports to make it more palatable to our customers who are just starting with this paid parking system.
Okay, and so then why would under what circumstances would somebody park for 60 days?
So that's an issue that we've dealt with more because I think parking has traditionally been free at the airport, where we're one of the only lots in town that is for free parking and designated for long-term use. We've had a number of vehicles that are either abandoned, where their owners will park here and then fly out and maybe never come back to Flagstaff for whatever reason, or people who aren't necessarily even parking related to the airport, they would use this as a place to keep their vehicle for free. Where they would, if they lived somewhere in town where parking was limited and needed a place to park their car for a long time, they would bring it out here and just sort of store it in our lots. We're hoping that the paid parking system itself will help decrease uses like that and really reserve the parking spaces for our airport customers. But this isn't unique to the Flagstaff airport. It's actually something that we've seen at other airports around the country. And it's mostly related to people who park vehicles, either take a lengthy trip, potentially maybe they're a student who's studying abroad for a semester and might want to leave a vehicle in place, or somebody who has a trip without a known end date. When they leave, depending on the cost of their vehicle, it might be more expensive to come back and get their car than it is to just abandon the car in place and never come back for it if their cars aren't particularly expensive. So we have seen that before, and other airports do deal with it. For example, Sky Harbor in Phoenix has a whole lot designated for abandoned vehicles where they tow vehicles that are abandoned in their parking lots and then go through an impound process. So it is something that airports deal with from time to time for various reasons.
Okay, and then the last question. So if a vehicle is abandoned, you keep it for a certain amount of time in storage or somewhere, and then if the person doesn't come to get it, then what happens to it?
There's a different section of city code, and I don't have the code section number in front of me, but it's related to impoundment of vehicles around the city that the police department can do. And they go through a process. There's generally a towing company under contract with the city that tows and impounds those vehicles, and then is responsible for storing them and eventually going through an abandonment process for the vehicle title with the state. So the vehicle could be auctioned if the owner never comes back. So we would be following the same process for abandoned vehicles that is done elsewhere in the city on public property.
We also work with our law enforcement officers to make every attempt to get a hold of the recognized owner on that. We found that there's a distinct difference between somebody who has just left it there long term, we're usually able to get a hold of, and those who, out of our last 8 vehicles that we were dealing with this on, 4, even MVD did not have an ownership on them. And it was quite obvious that had been an abandoned vehicle.
And then the last question, and so if it's auctioned off, who receives those funds?
General fund for the city.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
I do have a question for this slide. What are the penalties if they're, saying that a car is taking up 2 spaces and they receive a ticket? What are the penalties? That's
a great question, and that's one of the things I think we'll have to define as part of this exercise. So one thing we've done is we worked with our partners over at Park Flag, who's going to be helping us with the enforcement. So the same staff that enforce the vehicle rules and regulations in the downtown area and on city lots downtown will be coming out here to the airport to help us with those. So our initial thought is that we will try to, as closely as possible, match the penalties that they're using elsewhere in the city for consistency. If there are cases where we have a unique circumstance out here that is not found in other lots in the city, we might need to come up with our own fee structure. But so far, we haven't gone into the detail to establish what each of those penalties are yet. We'll have to meet with our Park Flag staff to figure out if there are any cases we have that don't match their current system.
All right, great, thank you.
Great, thank you for the questions. I appreciate that. That's a very good conversation. And that's part of the reason we wanted to bring this up. So on the next slide, we have a list or some annotated notes of what the current rules and regulations are in black with red and blue comments that we've added for our initial draft changes. We're going to be making some additional changes to that. And at some point, we would like to send that out to our airport commissioners so we can, once we have a final version of this in place, we could have a discussion on it. And if everybody feels confident with the current changes as we've had them written, we'd like to have a vote on it so that we can get some feedback from the airport commission prior to taking it to council for approval. So since this is in city code, when we get the final version that we like, we will have to take that to city council for final approval to be included in that code. So this is our initial shot at some of the changes we would like to see. And based on some of the comments we've had today, we'll go back and take a look at this and make some additional edits. And then once we get that in a good spot, we'll send that out to everybody on the commission for some additional chance for feedback and eventually, hopefully, a vote on the changes.
All right, thank you. Commissioner Breckenridge, you have a question?
Yeah, Brian, I was just curious, are you guys planning to do kind of a test run period once the system's operational until it's formally officially being charged to folks coming through?
We're still working on that. So city leadership has asked us to try to have this system up and running prior to Memorial Day weekend this summer. So as you know, the pieces are still falling into place on exactly how all these final construction pieces and installation of the equipment and the installation of the systems that will run it will be in place. Our hope is to have a chance where we can get a trial run where we could set the rate to 0 for a week or two to see exactly how that'll work, give our staff a chance to understand the systems and interaction. Some of that's going to depend on the exact timing and how the system comes online at once. One of the other aspects of this is we're holding off on opening the economy lot until we have the system in place. And we would really like to start transitioning vehicles to that economy lot so we can perform some maintenance activities to that terminal lot that we haven't been able to do so far. But yes, at this time, our goal is to have a trial run system in place where we can perform that for at least a number of days to make sure that the bugs are worked out of the system before we start charging. One other aspect of this is that we're going to have a contract with a third-party company that will provide customer service for the system. So if passengers drive up to a kiosk and they're having trouble paying or they're having trouble with the gate arm, they can push the call button 24 hours a day. It will go to a live person who can help troubleshoot that issue with them. And ultimately, the city gets to set the rules for how that customer service approach works. So if there's a case where they've spent maybe a minute or two trying to come up with a solution, if they can't find it at the discretion of that employee per our policy that we set with them, they can choose to open the gate to allow that passenger out. So we don't hold up the line, and hopefully during that trial run, especially when the system's relatively new and we're working the bugs out, we can still provide a good customer service to our passengers.
Vice Chair Jackson has a question.
Thank you. Brian, I was curious, I didn't see in here, at one time, did we talk about like encouraging people to park at the airport, or frequent flyers would get like a discount or a special space or something like that?
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's something we can consider. I don't recall a conversation about that, but it is something we could look into. The rate changes, if there's anything we did for a special rate, it would have to go back to council for approval, since the rates that we have in there were currently approved by council. But things like parking spaces is something that we have some discretion to talk about. One thing we have talked about including is some designated short-term parking spaces. So one issue we've had at the airport is under TSA and other federal requirements, it's illegal to leave a vehicle unattended at the curb front of an airport. And so now with our parking lot being pretty close to full relatively frequently, if somebody say has to run in to pick up a bag from the airline, or if they have a relative who might need help getting into the terminal with their bags, they have a tendency to just leave their vehicle right out front because there's no other convenient place to park. So we do want to designate some spots near the front of the parking lot as short-term parking spaces that people can have ready access to the terminal if they need to enter the building briefly or for some other reason that's under that 1 hour that is generally free at the airport. We're also working on a system where vendors, people who use services at the airport, say something like the airport restaurant, if they have a receipt from a restaurant inside the terminal, they could potentially gain a certain amount of free time in one of those short-term parking spaces. So if somebody wanted to come to the airport for lunch rather than driving to town, if they parked in the short-term spaces by scanning their restaurant receipts, they could potentially get an extra free hour of parking to encourage patrons to use those businesses.
Got it. I love all that. And I guess where I was going with this was I was thinking more of trying to get major employers and employers to utilize our local airport. And if we could do something to say, if you guarantee so many flights, we'll give you a sign or something. So that's where I was going with that.
I do like that idea, Commissioner. I think that's something that we can have some further conversations about.
Thank you.
All right, Heidi, you have your hand up.
Good afternoon, Chair, Vice Chair, Commissioners. Heidi Henson, Interim Deputy City Manager. I just wanted to say that we've had previous conversation with our past council about designated spots, and I don't think that they were against like a frequent flyer something, but I think they were worried about having spots designated that were being left unused. You know, if they weren't being used or frequented enough, that it would just upset other patrons that feel like they could park closer or what have you. So those are some of the things that we will have to continue to speak about or talk about when making these decisions, and if we bring anything else up to you and to the council. It works in theory if they're really flying that much, but if they're not, and you just see a bunch of spots that are closer to the terminal available and open, it upsets the rest of our patrons. And it looks like Barney might have something to add as well. Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry.
Nope, go ahead, Barney.
Come into with signage out there is we do have a couple designated by contractual designated spots, and the public will go ahead and use them. And we do not have a way of enforcing them to not use designated parking spots. Again, we wouldn't be opposed to it, but I'm not sure that we wouldn't cause more concern or angst on those people we're designated spot for if they come here and somebody's using their spot improperly.
Good point. All right, thank you. Brian, did you want to I think Vice Chair Jackson, you have another question?
Sure. I just think that I can appreciate that others might be frustrated if those spaces are taken. But as someone who does frequently fly and sees that there are spots where people, especially during the snow, I mean, you guys, all of the operation staff should be commended for your amazing patience. I mean, people were literally just parking, like there weren't even parking spots, and they were like parking in the middle of the road. So, and there was nowhere to park. So I'm sure that there'll be some hiccups as we go through it, but I would love it if we could revisit that.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Gail. Brian, did you want to continue? I know that you were a slide ahead.
Sure. Yeah, so as I mentioned, we'll be working on these changes in light of some of the comments we've had today and some others, and we'll hopefully get a draft out to the commission for review and eventually voting. And Commissioner Jackson brought up a great point with some of the issues we've seen with snow. Our hope is, so when the economy lot opens, we will have more than double the parking spaces that we currently had. So hopefully by just having more spaces available, generally speaking, they'll be easier to find. In our annual follow-up meeting to the snow season, we did have some discussion too about potentially at the beginning of winter, blocking off some large sections of the lot where we can reserve no vehicles in it for the first part of winter. And as soon as we get a big snowfall that is challenging to clear, we can clear that whole area off so there are larger sections of the lot that are available for parking. Also things like potentially blocking off some parking spaces in the winter in areas where we need to push snow past them to get into landscaped areas so we can clear it out better rather than leaving it stacked on the sides of the drive aisles or within parking spaces themselves. So we are working on some ideas that will hopefully make the parking more efficient and easier for people to find parking spaces, generally speaking. So hopefully that the fee that they see associated with parking at the airport will also come with some convenience about parking at the airport. I don't believe we have any more slides. If we do, we can go to the next one. If not, happy to take any other questions.
Any more slides? Nope. All right. Thank you very much, Brian. Any more questions for Brian before we move on to informational items? Commissioners. All right, hearing none. Thank you very much, Brian. We will move on to informational items. Airport Director update, Mr. Barney Helmick.
Yes. I'd first like to thank all of our commission members for the years you've served on the commission. Councilmember Harris, thank you for your service, especially those members who've been here more than a year. I really want to thank you. This will be my last Airport Commission meeting. If there's any remiss that I have is that I wished I'd had better presentations through the years. Sometimes I feel that I've not provided a good usage of your time sometimes. With that said, we have been going through a selection process for my replacement, and I believe all of you have seen the invite this afternoon. Our final candidate will be at City Hall between 3 and 4 for a meet and greet. And also you can go in through the Teams meeting app. But I really thank the commission members, past and present. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. And then I see Heidi would like to interject something.
Yeah, Heidi.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I just wanted to say that there's going to be a really nice article in the Daily Sun on Barney tomorrow, and those articles don't happen when you haven't made a big stamp on this community. And so I hope that you will tune in and find that article either print or digitally. If you have trouble finding it, I'd be more than happy to send it to you. We are also going to be having a little get together on Friday, April 21st, I believe at the Gopher Hole. We might change locations, but at any rate, we'll send that along to the commissioners if you'd like to come out and join us to cheer, have a little toast to Barney. And then on April 25th at the council meeting, those meetings start at 3, and we normally do recognitions very early during that meeting. There will be a recognition to really embarrass Barney thoroughly. No, I'm kidding. To recognize Barney and all of his efforts these last 12 and a half years, and not to mention just extensive knowledge that he's had with running airports. So I hope that we'll get all of those on your calendar if you don't already see those. Missy could forward them along. And I hope that you will join us. And I will tell you, when you come to the recognition on the 25th, what Barney says of not getting a lot in front of you, you will see how much Barney got in front of you at that meeting. There was a lot accomplished. And if I may add, with no money. So the things that Brian's working on right now with the CARES funding and ARPA is something that we have not experienced ever at this airport. We have been working at a shoestring budget, and I will tell you, you will be astounded with what was accomplished with that shoestring budget. And I'm so happy now that we do have funding so we can get some real work done that's been, just been on the back burner for too long. But at any rate, I hope that you will join us for those two events. And then, not to embarrass Brian Gall, but after several people that have applied for the airport director position were vetted, we asked 5 candidates to interview for the airport director position. All 5 had accepted, and then during that process, 2 of them had to withdraw because they had taken airport positions that they were offered somewhere else. We interviewed 3 people, and then it was a real very obvious to us that Brian was a standout and was the only candidate out of the 3 that we felt could come to the final interview. Well, Brian will be doing a presentation as well as having some time to mingle with you. You can listen to that presentation and you can ask questions online with the Microsoft Teams link that Missy and Barney can get to you, or you can come in person to City Hall at the chambers where we will be. That's today from 3 to 4. And I appreciate, again, all of your help in getting us to this point. And Barney, please, I hope you'll come out and celebrate him. I will definitely miss, I've been working with Barney for 10.5 years, and it has been an actual highlight. So thank you.
Thank you for that, Heidi. And thank you, Barney, for your service and your dedication to the Flagstaff Airport, to your team, and to this commission. We will absolutely miss you. Very grateful for all of your knowledge that you shared with us. Your presentations were absolutely wonderful. I think my favorite was on the history of the Flagstaff Airport. Just very much appreciated, and very, just very thoughtful, and your knowledge will definitely be missed, and very jealous that you're able to retire and enjoy the rest of your days relaxing, and we will definitely be thinking of you, Barney. So thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you all.
All right. Vice Chair Jackson.
Thank you, Chair Caldwell. I just wanted to say how much we're going to miss Barney too. I don't know how long it's been since I've been working with Barney, but he was always the go-to airport guy and always so helpful in so many things. So our community is really going to be lost without you, but excited for this next venture in your life. So thanks, Barney.
Thank you for that. Yeah. Councilwoman Harris, Barney, welcome to the retirement club. I love it. All right. All right, we are at the end of our meeting here, and do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved, Cal McCoy.
Thank you, sir. Do I hear a second?
Second from Tom Liddell.
Thank you, sir. All those in favor, please unmute and say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carries. Thank you, everyone. I hope to see you at 3 o'clock. Bye, everyone.